Hey, friends, welcome back to Strength Happens. We're so glad you're here with us today.
And if you're new, welcome. We're two moms who became friends through our daughters, both of whom have disabilities and complex medical needs. Between our two families, we've raised 7 kids. 2 are college graduates, 3 currently are in undergraduate school, and 1 is in grad school. We spent years navigating IEP meetings, doctor's visits, hospital stays, and everything in between.
So, today we want to talk about something that feels big for a lot of families, especially when your child has a disability or a chronic illness college drop off.
For many of us, when we think of the college drop off experience, there's this picture in our heads. I don't know about you, but for me, it's pulling up in 2 cars full of those blue IKEA bags, a cute little mini fridge with a matching microwave. Maybe you get to meet the roommate and their parents, and then you give those smoochy hugs in the hallway that totally embarrass your kid. And in my case, maybe shed a tear or two once you get back in the car. And then our kids are on their own. But when you have a child with a disability, it's not just a dorm drop off, it's the culminations of years of advocacy, planning, preparing them for what independence is going to look like when our kids are living with a disability and they're going to college, sometimes far away from home, away from their doctors, and away from their mamas.
What if the accommodations fall through or don't go far enough? And what if they push themselves too hard or not hard enough?
So, in this episode, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on what most people don't see when you have a young adult with a disability who heads off to college. Some of those late night phone calls telling you they're headed to the ER. Maybe it's those quiet pep talks or the paperwork or the proud tears of them heading off on their own. But it's also that very real fear that mama heart really feels when we've held our arms around them for so long and now we have to let them go. I think it's a little more poignant this time because I just left Neely at grad school and Janine just had her one daughter go off, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, it's hard. So, we're going to talk about the emotional, practical, and the invisible work that goes into helping our kids become more independent and what strength looks like when it means stepping back instead of stepping in.
Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do as parents is to drive away from that dorm room or that apartment, hoping all the groundwork that we've laid for them will hold up and trusting that our kid is stronger than anyone knows.
And before we jump in, we want to say this loud and clear. College is not the only path. There's trade schools, it's going to the workforce, supported living programs. These are all valid, worthy, and meaningful journeys. But in today's episode, we're going to focus on one particular road that's college. And if that's where your family is headed, or even just thinking about, we're right here beside you. Choosing a college is a big decision for any family. But when your child has a chronic illness or a disability, it's not just about rankings or majors, it's about survival and support.
Suddenly, things like class size or distance from home or dorm layouts, maybe access to campus health services or the disability services office aren't just extras. These are true essentials for our kiddos. And not all colleges are created equal when it comes to meeting these needs. And finding this is the key thing finding the right fit for our kid means asking questions most families never even think to ask when they go visit a college.
So, Jill, you have both personal and professional experience with disability support and the college experience. Can you share with us some things parents and students may want to consider when looking at colleges?
Sure. That's a great question. So, I work with about 500 students at the college I'm employed at. I'm the director of student accessibility services. Every college office at disability services may be named a little different, but you can find all their information on their website. And so, one of the things we want to think about when we're thinking about colleges is to think about your child. What are their specific needs? And then look at the colleges to see what they offer and see if there's a good fit based on what your child needs. So, colleges are not all created equally, just like not all disabilities are created equally as well. Differences in diagnoses mean different needs that our kids are going to need in college. For example, learning disabilities, ADHD, ASD, any form of neurodiversity are going to have specific classroom accommodations or maybe centralized housing locations. So they have less executive functioning things to work on. While medical diagnoses may require different accessibility needs, like an accessible dorm room with a private bathroom, maybe access to an elevator. So, some of the things you want to look at when looking at colleges: first is the size of the college, the physical campus. How big is the campus? How much do they have to navigate? Are they going to get overwhelmed on a larger campus with lots of people? Is that overstimulating? If there is a larger campus, does it have a van service that transports students around campus if they fatigue easily? Then look at the class size. Some students are super successful in a 300-person chemistry class, and some students are much more successful in a 20-person class. So these are real things you want to look at when thinking about what your child's needs are and what the college offers. One of the things I always try to teach parents is it's okay to allow your child to have a gap year, whether that's a gap year for maturity, or maybe you'd go to a local community college and take one or two classes while living at home so you have less executive functioning to work on. And you can just work on navigating going to class, learning how a college works, and maybe doing your own laundry at home while you have a support system just in case. Then you can work on going away from home if you're ready for that. So sometimes students want to stay near their doctor, so they may select a college within 2 hours. Others are happy to go 1,300 miles away, like my middle daughter did her freshman year. Other things you want to look at in a college: if they have medical issues, health services on campus, on and off campus, how close is the urgent care to campus when health services is closed? Is there a pharmacy access on campus? Maybe they don't have a car. How are they going to get their medicine? Is there a hospital nearby? Does it have the specialists they want? Those types of things. A big one I really try to teach students and parents to look for is the dorms. So many students are wanting a single bedroom, a medical single with a bathroom. A lot of colleges don't even offer that. So when my kiddo went away to college as a freshman last year, and on campus, they had 5 dorms on the entire campus that had their own bathroom.
Oh, wow.
So and so they have to prioritize those based on hierarchy of needs. So if that's a priority, look at a college that has more suite style dorms. Do they have dorms centrally located? Those types of things. Then there's physical accessibility. Are there elevators in all the buildings? Are there ramps? Otherwise, what is the college doing to help students with physical accessibility? They may have 4 newer buildings, so all the accessible classrooms and dorms are in those newer buildings. In addition, the last couple of things: one, what are the resources on campus? Do they have a counseling center? Do they have a career center, a writing center, an academic resource center? Do they have learning specialists that offer executive functioning support? And of course, you want to look at the campus disability services office. It's amazing. A lot of parents don't even realize some of the accommodations our kiddos had in college or in high school, they can also have in college. When you tour college campuses, encourage your family to go visit the college disability office. See what programs they have, what services they offer. What is the culture of disability on campus? Because your child's going to be interacting with them often, and you want them to feel comfortable using the services in that office.
Those are all really awesome considerations. I know for our daughter, Katie, she has a auditory processing issue and ADHD. So for her, we met with them beforehand, and we actually were given suggestions from their high school guidance counselor prior to even starting to look at colleges. I think junior year, we talked to them about, is college even going to be a consideration for her? So they helped us find schools that had these programs and that they had personally worked with. So that helped us make the transition, and just picking schools in the first place. We knew she needed something small.
I love that your high school worked on that. Most high schools do have a transition program, so it's great to tap into those services. If they have an IEP or a 504, they'll usually work with you on those transition plans. So that's great to hear. Plus, Katie has a mom who advocates for her as well, teaches
Well,
her to
I was just
advocate for
impressed that
herself.
they were able to give us that information. They gave us a couple different schools that they thought would be the perfect fit, and we toured,
Oh,
and then we also toured a couple big schools because she's a twin, so we toured all schools together, and she knew immediately that the bigger schools were not for her, that it was too overwhelming and too much. So it was cool to see that she even was able to do that.
I love that you did that because even though you may have known, hey, this might not be a good fit, allowing
Mhm.
them to visit those campuses is critical because you never want them to look back and say, oh, I wish I had gone to a big state school.
Right.
But after they tour it and they see what's offered and they can compare it to some of the other schools, they really feel confident in the decision they make going to college.
Yeah. We're very happy with what she decided, and she is being very
She's
successful.
flourishing there, absolutely. And, my kids have been a little different. One went to a smaller state school, and one is going to a local state school. So
Mhm.
finding that good fit is gonna be different for every child, even if they have similar diagnoses,
Mhm.
because it also depends on their personality and what they're gonna utilize. I think the key really is empowering your young person to be their own advocate, because if they're not gonna tap into those resources, you can lead them up to the disability services
Yep.
office and get file the paperwork for them, but they're the one who has to use those services. So
Yeah.
getting them to feel a sense of ownership of their diagnosis really is going to help them to be successful. I tell all my college students that disability is not a dirty word, and I think there's a lot of stigma associated with having a disability, but we're the cool kids on campus at our school. So we try to teach our kids to also embrace that element of excitement to find the support you need.
Yeah.
But getting support on campus doesn't always end with choosing the right school because for our kids, like you were saying, Katie has ADHD. Thank you for sharing that, and auditory processing. With my kids, they have medical issues as well as ADHD or ADD. So for our kids, setting up disability services is its own process, and honestly, one that can feel overwhelming. I see it from the perspective of a mom. I took my kids off to college and had to sit on my hands not to talk and advocate for them. But I also see it from the student and the parent's perspective when I'm in the chair of being the director of disability services. But you also have to help your child speak up in a whole new system. But here's the thing, having those supports in place can make all the difference in their success in college. We've seen that between our kids, and I think these parents are going to see that with their own. In this part of the episode, we're going to try and break down how we approach disability services, some of the questions maybe Janine and I asked, what we wished we had known sooner, and how we helped our kids not just qualify for support, but actually use the support that they were offered. There's a big hint here. The key is to let them take that lead in setting up those services. This is going to be the most difficult thing you do. Letting go is going to be hard, but it's what we have to do. And sometimes they'll make mistakes, but sometimes they're going to be surprise us and soon be super successful.
When should incoming students begin to even reach out to the disability service offices? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I always encourage students when they're taking tours of campus to reach out to the disability service office. I field probably about 25 parent student meetings in the spring or
Mhm.
fall before they enter college. Right when they're making their decision, maybe they've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 schools. Go ahead and make an appointment with that office and see what that relationship is like and if our student interacts with them well. It'll help the student feel more confident. You can learn about the culture of campus and accessibility needs and whether that college is the right fit. Then I say that as soon as you put that down payment on the college, so
Mhm.
it's May 1st for a lot of colleges, as soon as you put down that down payment, email the disability service office and ask to get the ball rolling. See what you need to do the paper.
Now, what types of accommodations can students even consider in college? Because I know it's very different from what you get in your 504 or even an IEP in high school. Does not transfer over, and they don't even call it a 504 in college. So, what would you recommend?
So there's several accommodations they can have in college. The big difference between high school and college is in high school it's the school's responsibility to identify the students who need support, to offer that support, and then to follow up and make sure the students are utilizing the
Mhm.
support on a consistent basis. In college, your plan from high school doesn't transition or get emailed straight over to the college and be implemented. The responsibility is now placed on the student. When they turn 18 and they enter college, it is their responsibility to reach out to the college and self disclose that they have a disability and they'd like the support and they get the documentation. Then
Mhm.
we can work on all the types of accommodations that we can provide them. But it's important to know that some students enter college and they just want to be a normal college student. They're tired of accommodations. They don't want to be considered different or having a disability. So don't be surprised if your student says, I really don't want to reach out to disability services that first semester. Politely encourage them, but ultimately it has to be their decision. So in the beginning, they may not decide to utilize those services, but I guarantee after the first semester, if they've struggled at all, they will be calling the accessibility services office soon. So once they do touch base with the office, they'll provide that documentation. And based on the diagnosis, they could get different accommodations. They typically break into academic accommodations, which are classroom or testing accommodations.
Mhm.
Classroom could be anything from use of a computer, permission to audio record, maybe getting all print material in electronic format if there's a visual impairment so they can make it bigger. If there's a processing issue, things like that. We also have things in college like smart pens. So they're a pen that has a camera on one end and a microphone on the other. So when a student is writing, it'll also be recording the professor. And then if a student has types of attention issues, maybe they zone out. They come back and they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot what I was writing. They just put a little star on their paper, leave it blank, and start writing some more. And then after class, they go back and they push where they left off in that blank of notes,
Mhm.
and the professor will start talking right at that point and they can fill in their notes. So we have some great accessibility services we can offer of assistive technology in the classroom. It really is going to depend on your student, even like ability to take breaks in class or get up and step out, ability to have a classroom near a bathroom if they have medical issues. So some of those classroom ones are very specific to their diagnosis. Testing accommodations may be extra time on testing. It could be testing in a distraction reduced environment, the use of speech to text software. Some of our students with learning disabilities do well with talking into the computer for the writing assignments. Other ones could be text to speech software. So they use a pen that goes over a specific statement or a paragraph they're supposed to read, and it will verbally read that out loud to them. When it comes to physical accessibility, we may have accessible classrooms, van services, access to a single use bathroom, things like that. Housing accommodations, the types of dorm rooms could be having a single, having a double, access to a bathroom. Medical singles are very specific in college and very rare. You need to speak with your college about. With students with executive functioning issues, a couple housing accommodations you may want to consider are, is their dorm room close to dining proximity? Because students who are running late to class or have trouble with time blindness, if they can roll out of bed and go grab breakfast real quick, it'll make the world a difference. But if they have to walk across campus, they may skip eating that day. So it's really packaging their accommodations based on how their brain's processing. Some students are successful when they're centrally located. Maybe they have arthritis and they fatigue. So having a dorm close to their classes or centrally located is good. Other things like having laundry on the same floor may seem like something simple, but taking one step out of the equation where they have to walk down a flight of stairs to do their laundry, that could be a big issue. And we've seen a huge increase in post COVID, a lot of diagnoses of POTS, which is a medical condition where blood doesn't circulate properly. And we also are seeing a major increase in mental health diagnosis of anxiety, depression, eating disorders. So, one of the housing accommodations we will see has to be an emotional support animal. And this is typically if you've had the animal for more than a year and you've worked with your therapist on providing you comfort and support. So, those are probably the main accommodations that we see throughout the college experience. But there's much more. It's important to work with your director of accessibility services.
Yeah, it seems like the key is really to reach out early and
Mhm.
then talk to the appropriate people. That way you can get your documentation and everything you need ahead of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What types of documentation do you think is typically required for any type of disability service?
It's going to vary based on diagnosis, just like everything else. But the first thing I always encourage students to do is to look on the Student Accessibility or Disability Service website for your college.
Mhm.
They usually have their own paperwork to make it simple for your provider.
Mhm.
So if they have their own forms, I would say download those forms and just take those forms and make an appointment with your provider and have them fill it out. It's the easiest, quickest way to get the accommodations approved. Some providers will also write letters. of support in addition to or as opposed to filling out a form. If your provider does that, they need to write it on official letterhead with their credentials
Mhm.
and their license number, whether they're a medical provider or a mental health counselor provider. We do require their license numbers. So it could be from a psychologist, a counselor you work with, it could be your primary care physician, your pediatrician. A lot of times I like to see the 504 plan or IEP so I can see what worked in high school and what goals they had that we could build
Mhm.
upon. And often we look for if there's a learning disability, ADHD, something like that, we look at a neuropsychological or a neuroeducational assessment that really gives an in depth view of your child. Most colleges require that to be 1 to 3 years old. So really check with your school to see what the age of that document is acceptable for that institution.
Yeah, for us, it was pretty easy. We just went on the website, grabbed the forms, and then I called the SAS office and asked because we had something that came up after school started with another daughter, and we needed to do totally different things for her. So I called and got exactly what I needed, so then I could go to the doctor's office. I didn't want to keep going back and forth, back and forth. So I found it easier just to call, find out exactly what I needed to have that form say, and then we contacted the doctor, and then they took care of it.
I'm glad you did that because that's a huge issue is even though your kids are twins, they have totally different
Mhm.
diagnoses, totally different needs. So keeping it simple for yourself, but also for the accessibility office as well. And we field calls daily and we don't mind those at all as long as we can make your life easier. Most offices are called student accessibility services. So we do want to make it accessible for the parents as well.
Yeah. Well, I know the other thing that I'm not sure if you've mentioned already is that you can also make requests after school has started mid-year. I know you said that sometimes the kids don't want to do it, but then you might have a new diagnosis that shows up, the second half of the year or a couple months in, that it's okay.
Absolutely.
You can ask for services at any point in time, or at least that's what we found, is we were able to add services for her sister midway through the year that helped take care of some other things like the anxiety, some testing accommodations.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that too, because sometimes, even for students who get services set up prior to school starting,
Mhm.
they may not know fully what they need till they get into their classes in a college environment. So you can always add accommodations if you set
Mhm.
up services earlier, or if you got a new diagnosis or you were too afraid to apply in the beginning or you didn't think you'd need it, you can apply at any time and we can get those services set up. The
Mm.
only caveat is with housing accommodations, that's the only one that's
Yeah.
a little harder to do mid semester. We'll still staff you in, but they may not have that dorm accommodation mid semester. So you just go on a wait list until something comes available.
That's a good point. Now, if your child has medical issues, how is the best way to navigate on campus health services? Like, do you use campus health services, or do you just bypass that and do something else?
So it varies based on your child's diagnosis
Mhm.
and your college medical services. So let me give you a quick example. My daughter Neely has a primary immunodeficiency, Ehlers-Danlos, dysautonomia, and Chiari malformation. So a number of medical issues, as well as auditory processing disorder. So when she went to college, we knew she would have to do infusions once a week. We know she gets chronic infections and we know she sees about 4 or 5 specialists a year. So we started with student health services because University of Connecticut is a larger college infirmary. And they also had access to Yukon Health, which has a number of the specialists she'd need. So
Mhm.
what we did was after she accepted, we made an appointment with one of the nurses and they were super helpful. They gave us a tour of the facility. They asked questions about her diagnoses. They asked what medication she was on. They asked about her infusions. She was able to share these things with the nurse. And the nurse said, "Yeah, you are a little complex. Not we can handle this, but I think it would be important for you also to meet one of our medical providers." So they brought one of their physicians in who met her as well. And then the two of them answered her questions to her satisfaction as well as mine
Mhm.
and said, if at any point we don't meet your needs, we'll give you referrals to local primary care physicians or specialists.
Mhm.
They also had at Yukon Health, and it varies again by colleges, but they had a place where students could be admitted overnight, like
Mhm.
a mini triage center, so they could do IV fluids. She could. They had an infusion room, so kids who got chemotherapy or Neely does gamma globulin infusions, they could go in the infusion room and get their treatment there, whether it was self administered, home health nurse came, or one of their nurses did. So that really eased our worries about what we needed. Some smaller colleges may not have those services. So, looking around the community, we looked at how far was an urgent care, which it was across the street. We looked at how far the local larger medical facility was. What were the good hospitals? What were the reputations?
Hmm.
How many specialists were within an hour? The things we knew she would have to do. And we also looked at pharmacies. So it's going to vary based on that college. I would always start within the campus, see if they have a pharmacy, see what their health services are like, and then ask them for referrals locally if they can't meet your needs. I think it's important too when we have kids with medical issues who are on a lot of medications to know that they're also normal teenagers who are going away to college. So things
Yeah.
like alcohol and parties are normal experiences. For me as a mom, taking off my professional hat as a mom, I was very nervous about alcohol because of how much medication goes through my kids' livers. But we had a phenomenal immunology nurse, Nurse Carla, who, when Neely went to college and when B went to college, they said two things. One is when it comes to sex, wrap that shit up. You don't want any diseases, so make sure there's condoms involved. And then she said, "You're going to drink in college." And Neely at the time was like, "No, I'm not." And Carla's like, "Yes, you will. No more than 2 drinks at a time, and make sure you drink a certain amount of water in between." Like, she went over all this with
Hmm.
her. I encourage you to step out because they can talk about those heavy conversations of sex, of alcohol, of drug use, of smoking, and give them the reality based on their medical issues. There's things you can enjoy, like a drink here and there, but
Hmm.
there's things you really shouldn't. Also, it's important when they have medical issues to know their triggers. So, is heat a trigger? Is lack of sleep or stress a trigger? And it's important they understand how it impacts their body. Also, set up a medication management plan and an emergency plan. Those are things that normal college experience with healthy kiddos you don't have to do, but knowing campus safety, knowing 911, understanding when to call, what hospital to request to go to. Now, granted, even the best laid plans, okay. So I have a degree in disability. I work with college students on a daily basis. And I prepped for every emergency possible. There were things that still came up that we hadn't thought through. And that first semester, just know that it's some ups and downs are going to happen and be flexible.
Hmm.
During the first week of classes, they had welcome week at UConn, and Neely got dehydrated and had multiple pass out episodes. And her roommate called me, "What do I do?" And I said, "You need to call for the campus van, see if you can get back to the room." The van didn't come. I said, "Call campus safety." Campus safety came. They thought she was a drunk college student. Neely's like, "I don't want to go to the hospital. It's my first week of school." They have to go on their safety protocol. So she did go to the ER. And the ER doctor called me, was super great. She had a POTS episode. We're hydrating her. But after that, we had to reassess our safety plan. I never even thought about getting an emergency alert band. But now they have beautiful emergency alert bands and they have QR codes on them. And it goes to a website that you manage and you can list all their emergency contacts, their diagnoses, their medications, their allergies. So that was one thing I hadn't thought of putting into place.
I hadn't even really considered about doing an emergency alert band for Katie. It probably would be beneficial for her to have that. But even Morgan, I need something to put on her. I thought of something on her shoe maybe because she
Yeah.
wouldn't wear a piece of jewelry.
They have them that go on the shoe like runners have,
Yeah. Yep.
and it will have that QR code as key because our
Yeah.
kids usually have a lot of medications,
Yeah.
allergies, or diagnoses. But also, if your child's neurodivergent, even if your kid's neurodivergent and in college, they
Hmm.
can sometimes get brain fog, they can shut down verbally. So just letting them know what the best way to communicate with them is. Sometimes texting is easier when they're overwhelmed. So
Hmm.
having that important information in your medical alert QR code is really helpful. With Morgan, I think that would be great, especially since she goes to a day program where
Well, and
she's not
that's the
there.
day program too. Like if anything were to happen, at least if they had to call an ambulance, they can scan and go from there.
And that's one thing I didn't realize because it was a suggestion from the ER doctor. Goes, no, all our paramedics look for bracelet, necklace, and shoes
Okay.
immediately when someone passes out or has a medical emergency because they do have those QR codes that can give some vital information. Now, does Neely still wear it? No. Am I going to have a conversation with her now after having this conversation with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, especially because she's in a new environment again.
Yes,
For her,
absolutely.
it's resetting and they're not going to know her.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, it sounds like there can be a lot of invisible lists that are not on the normal dorm essential list of things to bring and do, like your Amazon list.
Your Amazon wish list or Pinterest
Yeah.
board.
But as a mom who has sent 3 kids off to college, I think it can be a lot for any 18-year-old to plan and navigate. You can prepare and prepare, but something's bound to happen. But when your kid has a disability, there's also so much more to consider. Like, how do we prepare them for navigating this all on their own? How do we let go?
That's the biggest one. I see so many parents that I work with who are sending their kids off to college, whether it's a medical diagnosis or a learning disability or a diagnosis of neurodiversity, that just are having a hard time. And I don't blame them.
Mhm.
I understand them. As a mom, you protect your kids for 18 years. You put your arms around them. It was your job to keep them alive, to advocate for them. And now we're just like, okay, you can go and
Yeah.
live on your own when used to know everywhere you were. But that's part of growing up with all our kids. And if
Mhm.
our kids want to feel as normal as possible, we've got to let them feel that way. So we as parents or caregivers, while we've advocated for them and supported them for 18 years, it's our time to let go. And I think it's one of the things we can teach them a life lesson by letting them take the reins. And sometimes we can do this early in life. We talked a little bit about this last week. They can start finding their independence even in preschool. It builds the foundation for college. It builds the foundation for independence. So when they're little, letting them pick up their own clothes, setting the table, it works on some of those executive functioning skills
Yep.
too. I know you feel this too, Janine, but every time when you have kids with disabilities, you can view everything they do around the house as a form of therapy, as a form of executive functioning. Like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
how can I integrate this into here? One of the life lessons I learned, I might have mentioned it in the previous episode, but I learned when Hallie was just in third grade that I had to let go. And Miss Dean, she goes, you need to let Hallie come into the classroom. You're no longer welcome in, because Hallie was independent, but she would let me do everything when
Yep.
I was there. But as soon as I left the room, or John dropped her off, she was fine. It was just she was used to me. And she goes, I go, Hallie, why do you always let me do everything? And she goes, because you like to. But she could be fully independent. I wasn't giving her the opportunity.
Well, and it's just easier. Like, we found that with I told you about Morgan with the seatbelt. Every time she gets into the van, I put the seatbelt on her, because we do that in the car. And the driver said to me one day, "You know that Morgan can do that on her own." And I'm like, "Well, she's never done it for us." So then, sure enough, click, she got it in. I was like, "Oh, that little booger."
I
So
know they can surprise us, can't
yeah, so
they?
you do. It's very hard to let go, and sometimes you may not even realize that you're holding them back in some way. Well, and I didn't think she could do. And and in a car, it's very different because the cars don't have that extra extension where a van would have the extension that she could actually fit it because it's not buried in the seat. So now I'm going to order an extension so she can do it in the car.
I love that other people can teach us about our own children, right?
Mm.
And it doesn't hurt our self-esteem. We're like, great,
Yeah, it's
something
like,
else they
hey,
can do,
yep.
you know? And we can even let our kids start doing stuff. It's funny, some of the things I ask my kids to start doing just to teach them independence and help them prepare for one day leaving home. In middle school, all my kids had to take over doing their own laundry. One, it was a survival mechanism for me. I was back at work, but it was time for them to be independent. And then when I'd be on vacation, I'd offer to do their laundry, and they're like, no, we prefer to do it ourselves. And my kids to this day prefer to do their own laundry because we taught them that skill when they were younger. Then when they went to college, it wasn't something new. They had already had that skill set in their pocket. In high school, I required each of my kids to learn to cook 1 to 2 meals a week. One, it helped me out as a working mom, but it also taught them independence. So
Mhm.
these little things we do when our kids are younger, all the way from preschool through high school, find ways you can get them to learn some of the skills they're going to need in college. We also work on teaching our kids when they're young self advocacy and communication. When they went to college, it wasn't scary to talk to the professor about their accommodation needs because they had already done that in middle school and high school. So, allowing them ways to share their diagnosis, whether it's with a coach, a high school teacher, a family friend, just to have a prepared story. Neely, we actually practiced some of those things the summer before she went to college. So she had 1 or 2 quick sentences she could say, something she felt comfortable with. So she felt confident in saying what she wanted. It's funny because I'm not good at letting them advocate for themselves, even though I should be the one teaching them. John was the one who would be like, let them order their own food at Subway or send them to go buy the groceries at the grocery store.
Mhm.
They can do that. And I would always just do it for him, kind of like you were saying with Morgan, because it was just easier.
I find too, a big one is calling and making your own doctor appointments or hair appointments. They really struggle doing that. I don't know why. It's like just pick up the phone and make a call. It's not hard, but started them doing that like at 16.
Isn't that a huge thing
Mhm.
though? Because having them talk on our phone, our kids are used to texting or
Yeah.
Snapchatting, but for whatever reason, they don't like to talk to humans in person or on the phone. It's scary. Before your kid goes to college, it's really, really important for them to know what their diagnoses are. I've had some
Mhm.
students go through disability services and they didn't even know all their diagnoses. And
Um,
sometimes we want to protect our children from an autism diagnosis
right.
or a learning disability, but it's in their paperwork and we're going to share it with them. So, really making sure they're well versed in their diagnoses and how it impacts them. I just had a kiddo. I did an interview with him yesterday through an intake. He knew how his diagnosis impact his brain and processing, and it
Mhm.
helped me identify the right accommodations for him.
Mhm.
They also need to know their medications, their allergies, how to refill those medications, when to take them. So
Mhm.
preparing them over the summer to really take the lead, and if we can, prepare them earlier throughout high school.
Mhm.
And the last thing I really want to leave parents with, that I think this is so critical, is we put so much emphasis on our kids' grades and their GPA. Super important. But when our kids are going off to college and they're having to take 4 college level courses, living on their own, managing living with a roommate, managing going to the dining hall, they're learning to talk to professors, all of these things they haven't had to do. Work with redefining what success looks like in college. Maybe celebrate that they made it to class on time every day of the week. Celebrate making a friend, talking to someone. I got a call from a mom one day and we do this social hour for students who are neurodiverse. And one of the girls met another girl in the group and the mom called me and said she's made a friend and she's eating lunch and dinner with her every day. And that just is huge. And that parent celebrated that success with me and with her daughter. But they're just celebrate all those successes. This is a big change, but for our kids, it's a bigger change than we could even imagine. Many of us don't live with these disabilities. So give them some time to transition.
This is all great information. And what are some things you wish you knew with your own kids sending them off to college, or some things you wish someone had told you before you went?
Again, great question, Janine. Planning is important, but flexibility is where the survival is. It's okay not to have everything in place from day one. Sometimes you just need to be flexible and adapt as your kid adapts and learns once they get to college. One thing I enjoyed having was finding a local support for my college student in the community where they lived. I was fortunate enough to find people about an hour away. One of my kids, Neely, had a family friend who lived an hour away. So if there was an emergency, I felt confident. Neely's now in another state, and one of our friends is a nurse there. So I feel fortunate she has that. And B had someone on campus where they went to school. So if you can find a local support, great. I wish I personally had learned to reframe success. I didn't learn that until I worked with hundreds of college students, but it's really all about growth on our young people, not the timeline.
Mhm.
So if they need a medical leave, don't put pressure on them to push through. It's okay if you have to take a medical leave to go home. Another thing I wish I'd known, college students are very immature. They're not going to get the complexity of all our kids have to go through. So, not all friendships are going to go smoothly. And reminding your kiddo they will find their people, but it's going to take time. Take the stigma off eating alone in a college campus. Many people who are athletes, even on campus, and have all the friends in the world, just don't see their friends during mealtime. Take that pressure off and let your kids know that's super normal. Another thing I wish someone had told us was there's no single roadmap for launching your child with chronic needs. It's very different than all my friends who had kids going off to college. I have 2 medically complex kids, and their experiences were totally different within our own family. And I also have 50 to 75 incoming freshmen each year, and I see a different story for each and every one of them. So knowing it's going to be different for every child. And that is completely okay. As a parent, we just want to be there as a support, step back and let them grow. Is there anything you wish someone had told you with your kids leaving for college?
I mean, I think you've said it in a nutshell is that really they're immature when they leave. No matter what you do to prepare them, there's always going to be something that's going to come up that you didn't prepare for, especially when it comes with mental illness like anxiety and depression that happened with one of my daughters that we thought we had prepared for. 6 months before she went to school, she was already in therapy, and we thought we worked through a lot of things, but it wasn't, and we had to do a medical withdrawal, and it's okay. I would much rather them do that than push through something and then they wanna self-harm or they turn to alcohol or to drugs. We worked really hard at making sure there was a lot of open communication, and I'm just glad that she called and said, "I need to come home." So to me,
Mm.
those are the things I wish no one prepared me for any of that. Everything you've said is really good information that you can only set them up to succeed, but they have to do it themselves at that point too. They have to make that choice. And sometimes they're just not mature enough or ready to make that choice.
And that's okay. But thankfully, you got to see the benefit of all that groundwork you laid, right? You had that open communication, that strong relationship with your child before they went to college. And when they needed you most, they reached out to you. And the fact that you said, "Hey, you're safe, come home," that's what they needed in that moment. And I commend you for that because it's so hard to take a step back and see college isn't everything. And when
Well,
they're
and
ready,
it's hard too because she's a twin. So, when you have your sister
whole
doing
different
and
dynamic.
being successful, it's different because we had a lot of pre-diagnoses prior to college. So we were able to set her up all through middle school. Like we started with at the AVID program in middle school. And to me, that helped make her so much more successful going into college because it
Mm.
gave her all those executive functioning skills that she needed. So because the other one didn't get diagnosed with the ADD until college, that was a totally different experience. So now we're taking steps back and teaching her the executive functioning now.
To
So
prepare her for life,
right.
whatever path she takes, so and it's look at you, you had twins, and it's 2 totally different
Totally two
experiences,
different. Two different
and that's
personalities, two different experiences.
it's just knowing we take if we can set the example and take the pressure off them, they're gonna feel more comfortable coming and talking to
Mhm.
us. I remember someone taught me the term "calm brings calm," and so when there's chaos in a moment of stressful mental health issues or stressful medical issues, if we can kinda be our calm self and approach it with a level-headed mind, our kids are gonna feed off our energy,
Right.
and we learned that when our kids were little, but when they get older, we're still parenting, right?
Yeah.
Bigger kids, bigger problems.
Right.
That's what I feel like.
Yep.
Some days I'm like, "Let's go back to diapers," where all I had to deal with was
Right.
spilling a sandwich on the floor.
True.
But
But
we all know our child's drop off is not gonna look like everyone else's, and maybe your version of letting go is a heavy 3-ring medical binder that goes with them to school, or maybe an extra long pharmacy run after you check them into the dorm, maybe even a major freak out in the parking lots. You never know. It's gonna be different than others.
so if you're in the middle of it right now, planning, questioning, concerned for what's different, we see you. You're not behind, you're not crazy. You're just parenting on a whole different level of love and courage.
Remember, independence doesn't have to mean doing it all alone. Your kiddo's learning that, and maybe you are too. Give yourself some grace. Thank you for being with us today. We'd love to hear your story. What are you most concerned about letting your kids go to college? What did your launch look like at college drop off? Send us a DM, leave a comment, or tag us at Strength Happens Real 3.
And don't forget to check the show notes on our website for a free college disability planning checklist. It's everything we wish we had in one place.
We'll see you next time. And until then, remember you can find your strength within. And it takes a lot of strength when we're dropping our kids off at college. And when you can't find that strength, don't worry. We got you. Strength eventually happens.